Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I want to talk about Mai Ling from the TV show Warrior. Now, really quickly, I don't really know fully, this all off the top of my head, so I don't know fully all the examples and discussions I'm going to have. It most likely will involve stuff from season 3, so if you're not completely caught up with the show, do not watch this. But I want to talk about Mai Ling because I think she is such an interesting character, you know, putting her in the villain category. Because yeah, I will view her as a villain, but I think she is one of those villains that has such a complicated gray area to her, because she is a villain that is born out of pain, trauma, and that has also led to her ambition and her thirst for power, which ultimately ends up being her undoing in so many regards and so many capacities. Because obviously we know, like, what was it Sun Yang, the guy she was kind of, the warlord she was forced to marry, and the abuse and everything she had to go through while being under him, and obviously, you know, running away to America just to get away from all of that. And she even has this interesting, so this is going to be definitely a season 3 spoiler, but it's just that interesting conversation she had with Eliza in the season 3 finale, where she talked about, I am never going to be anyone else's whore ever again. I made a promise to myself I would never be anyone's whore. I would never be under anyone else's power, the power of another man again, because that trauma, like, created something in her. Like, that is the thing of, if it wasn't for her, you know, I mean, what are we if we are not, like, you know, the amalgamation of all our experiences? And her experiences were so painful and traumatic, it morphed her from Zhao Jing into Mai Ling. She had to bury who she was because she never wanted to be that person again. She never wanted to be that girl who went through all that she had to go through, the girl who sacrificed herself to save her brother's life when she kind of had to be married off to this warlord, and no one came for her, no one saved her. And oh, when her brother Assam shows up, when did he show up? Oh, after Sun Yang is dead. It's like, oh, but you can come back home. It's like, no, don't try and rescue me now when I sacrificed myself for you. She felt like she had no one in this world, so all she could rely on is herself. And so after escaping her circumstances, finding her place here in America, which obviously there's not that many opportunities for anyone Chinese, let alone a Chinese woman, so she took advantage of the situation she had. And we don't know too much about her backstory with Long Zi. Yeah, it seems like he legitimately was a nice guy. He might have treated her well. I mean, we really don't know that relationship. It doesn't seem like he was ever abusive to her in any capacity. He was nice, and so when she ultimately does kill him, she does feel bad, but I think it is almost irrelevant because she always saw an opportunity that, like, if I'm with him, I'll always be protected. I'll be okay. I'll be in a powerful position, but it's like, it's not just enough being his woman. I need this power for myself, because that's the only way I'm ever going to secure myself, the only way I'm ever going to feel secure. Because I think for her, there's always going to be wanting more and more because of what was taken from you. She's trying to fill this void inside of herself, and the only way she can is because in her mind, she equates safety with power. It's like, the more powerful I get, the more no one can ever hurt me, no one can ever touch me, and all of that ambition, that need for power ultimately ended up being her undoing, because she would cut down anyone that got in her way. Like, she could seem irrational and unreasonable at times, but it is once again a situation of people look at her certain way of like, oh, the only reason why you're in the position you are in is because you crawled into Long Zi's bed. And like, she feels like, if I don't, like, nip that in the bud now, any dissension, it's going to lead to other people trying to, like, gun for me. But her overstepping and going for the jugular and literally wiping out the entire elders of the Long Zi once again led to her being on her own. I mean, I would even compare the Liang situation to the Long Zi situation. I truly do believe she does love Liang, but I think there's always going to be a part of her that's scared to ever fully open herself up to someone because of that pain and trauma. Like, she doesn't ever want to go through that again, and I think that traumatized her into never ever fully connecting with someone, because I think it's a thing of, she wants to connect with Leon, but it's hard for her to ever be truly open with someone about, because this is a person who rides for you all the way through, no matter what Compok said, no matter what the other Long Z said, no matter what anyone else had to say about her, he followed her. But obviously, like, he disagreed in some moments about how she handled things, because when it's all said and done, Mai Ling can be ruthless, but then she has these vulnerable moments where when you realize, you kind of see the real her, that this whole thing is kind of a show, a bravado that she puts on because it's the only way. Like I think there's some truth in it, because like I said, Mai Ling is who she needs to be. I need to be this cutthroat, brutal leader, but I think in certain moments you see the Xiaojing come out, like when Leong is like, do you really think I would hurt you? And she's crying and she's like, I don't know. I think moments like that, those vulnerable moments, that's not Mai Ling, that's Xiaojing, you know? And I think that's what just makes that character so complicated. No much how she wants to try and bury who she used to be, there's still nuggets of who she was deep down inside. Those are parts of herself she can't fully cut out, no matter how much she's tried over the years. Heavy is the head that wears the crown type of situation, right? And I talked about this in the season 3 finale, that she literally has no one. That the ironic thing is, despite the beef between her and her brother, which even they've slowly repaired the relationship, that at the end of it all, she is alone, but luckily she has a Sam at the end. She doesn't have Leong, the Long Z. Those who aren't dead have abandoned her. So she's kind of alone in this world again. But it kind of almost like what should have happened before her brother being there. He failed her before, but he didn't fail her this time. Like, he was like, I got you, I'm here. Like, obviously he showed up still too late, but the fact is he showed up at all, and it's like, I choose you. I've chosen you over my brothers in the Hop Way. I've chosen you over June. I've chosen you over Hong. I mean, that's also, I think, why that season 2 finale moment between her and the weight of her and Atoy's moment, where it's like, right, we don't really get along because Atoy doesn't really like the way Mai Ling moves, but they are both kind of cut from the same situation. I mean, it's not the exact same situation, but both of them come from a place of pain and trauma that has motivated them to become the person that they are. Like, that pain and that trauma is going to harden you, and you're just never going to be in that situation again. So they're a lot more alike, and I think Atoy can kind of feel that to some extent, but it's still the thing of, I don't move as recklessly as Mai Ling does, because Mai Ling is young. Just like Assam, they're both young and cocky, and they think they're hot shit. But you know, it's like age and wisdom, like a Long Z or Father June, and even Atoy have more age and wisdom on them. That it's like, you know, that they don't kind of like go about things as like a bull in a china shop kind of metaphor of just kind of like, you know, just steaming ahead and just like rolling forward and not stopping, you know? It's like there's times where you have to kind of stop and think, which, don't get it twisted, Mai Ling is very ambitious and manipulative in what she does. I mean, I also go back to the whole aspect of like looking at her relationship with Buckley. Like, what her long end goal, despite maybe not fully knowing what Buckley, his ambition was, it does, you know, she probably got a little more understanding of his full ambition in season 3, but she always saw him as a means to an end. I guess in her head she thought, once I get my power, I'll get rid of you. You're just a stepping stone for greener pastures, you know? And so, who cares about the ramification it was going to have on Chinatown? I mean, but like, even going back to that season 2 finale of, she even told Atoy, like, putting the Tong stuff aside, we're all Chinese in this moment. Despite her throwing Chinatown under the bus, throwing her other people under the bus because of her situation with Buckley. But like I said, it's moments like that. That's a Xiaojing moment. That's not a Mai Ling moment. Because it's like, right, when it's all tomorrow, when this is all said and done, we'll go back to fighting each other, hating each other, and going for our ambitions. And she immediately kind of went back to it after the fact, once again throwing Chinatown and other people under the bus because it meant getting what she wanted. I mean, and once again, that conversation about like your ambition getting the best of you, going back to the Eliza situation, like, she was warned about kind of like going about that recklessly, but I think she's so used to being in some control that, and she put herself too far, she stretched herself out there too far, where it's just like, oh, I'm here in the town with all these white folks, it's fine, like, I got them eating out of the palm of my hand, like, but then it's like that situation flipped on her so quickly, and she's like, right, I messed up. I promised myself I'd never let someone else have power over me. I'd never let anyone treat me like a whore. I messed up. but I learned that lesson yet again, and it's never going to happen again. Like I said at the beginning, I would label her as a villain, but I'd also say that she's so much more, because there's such interesting nuance and complications to that character. Because there are moments where I've talked about it, I understand what that character is and who she is and what she's going through and how that's morphed her into who she is, how she went from Xiaojing to Mai Ling. But it doesn't mean I agree with every move she's made, because I was like, yo, you kind of like, you're out of pocket sometimes with the way you've kind of moved and the way you operate. But like I said, there's moments of those vulnerable moments of Xiaojing that you're just like, I see the woman that's there who's doing all this for a very specific reason. So I think that's what just makes her this interesting, well-rounded character and really interesting villain in that capacity. Because obviously, when especially when you compare her as a villain to like the other villainous people in the show, you're like, oh, she's a villain. It's like, yeah, but there's also more atrocious human beings in the show, especially considering the time frame the show takes place in. It's like, you know, she might be manipulative and she might be bloodthirsty, but she's not the monster that other, like, it's such, I actually think it's such an interesting thing about the world of Warrior, because it's like, are there any good guys? I think there's good people who kind of have to go about things because of the circumstances that they're in, just like Mai Ling. Everyone's kind of a byproduct of their experiences and their circumstances. And so it is this thing of, is there something, does something as antiquated as good versus evil exist? It's like, yes, there is evil in this world. Yes, there is good, but there's so much gray area because some of that overlaps with characters like Mai Ling. Which I'd say, like, she's a bad guy. I wouldn't call her evil, because we've seen evil people on that show. So I don't know. I think it's just kind of an interesting thing, just comparing Mai Ling and her character to the overall feel and vibe of the show of, you know, good guys, bad guys, people in the middle, you know. It's such an interesting thing, because I say all that, but there is the thing of, like, yes, there are heroes. Like, I would put Assam in that regard in some capacities. I think he's had his hero's journey, but it's had its bumps in the roads. But I think, you know, it's come with its complications for you know, Assam's journey, and I think it's just this interesting parallel of Mai Ling's journey, of just how they've grown like these separate paths, and how those paths kind of weave together and then weave apart, and how they've kind of done that over the course of the show, and to be where they are at the end of season 3, finally together, their paths crossing, them only having each other, being tossed aside in Mai Ling's case and being abandoned after everything that you've done, and Assam leaving everything behind despite how he feels and all that he's done for what, you know, and just for them to be alone at the end and only having each other when it's all said and done. But obviously these are just some of my thoughts. I'd love to get to know your thoughts about Mai Ling. Which side on the fence do you kind of lean? Do you see the complications of the character, or you're like, nah, complications aside, I don't care. She's done some dirty stuff. She's a terrible person. Like, you might completely write her off. I mean, you might like her as a character because of that. They'll be like, oh, I like her as a villain, but I'm not as sympathetic towards her. Or is it a thing of, you're just kind of like, nah, like, I don't even like her. Like, I hate her. I'm so curious. You know, once again, always got to remember separating the actor from their characters. That just shows you how good of an actor is when they're able to kind of portray such a, like, manipulative kind of bad guy person who's willing to do whatever it takes to get what they want. Like I said, I'd love to get to know your thoughts in the comments down below. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good